Income inequality marginally decreased by 0.101% in the past 4 years. The gap between the haves and the rich and poor continues to widen. The Commission's report is based on tools at the government's disposal to address economic inequality through radical economic transformation. Now, to talk to us about the report, we're joined in the studio by one of the authors, Siphelo Mbeki. He's an equality researcher at the Human Rights Commission. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
You launched yesterday. Who are the people who interact with this report?
So at our launch, we invited the departments who are receiving the recommendations that we make in our report, because they are the first recipients, because they've got the obligation to implement the recommendations. But you also had civil society, and you also had the media there. But most importantly, the report is meant for the public, which is why we do the launch, because that's where we publicize it officially. But we also have it on our website, which is where it's accessible to most people.
Okay, we invited our viewers to call in earlier, and we hope they will be interacting with this conversation. But 24 years into democracy, poverty eradication remains a promise by government. Why is it so challenging?
Part of that is the lack of implementation of the laws that we have, even though they are not the best, but they are not also best implemented. But also, the government has also failed to create access to the economy. Our report recommends that one of the best ways of radically changing the economy to make sure that substantive equality is achieved, and to make sure that the gap is bridged between the haves and the have-nots, is to make sure that we create access to the economy. Yeah. So the report picks up a number of areas, and we use those areas as examples of how they can be used to create access to the economy, particularly for the poor. So that's higher education, that's public procurement, that's access to land, and that's changing the labor market in terms of demographics, in terms of gender, in terms of making sure that minority groups are also represented.
We asked our viewers to interact with us on social media at the agenda_SABC, but we're also asking them to call on +271 171 But one of the questions we asked is, what aspect of your life renders you unequal in your society? What are those? Run those down for us.
It's this socio-economic inequality. So your social standard is based on your access to the economy or lack thereof. So if you have access to the economy and you're economically active, then socially you're better off. But then there's also the poverty line that defines who is living under it and above it. And it's in 2015, it was at 992 rands per month. So anyone who doesn't make more than that amount per month is living under the poverty line. And it was about 55% of people who were living beyond that line. So if you have no access to the economy, then you are unlikely to be at a better social position.
You also speak about gender and disability, location, geography. Unpack those for us.
Those matter the most. So in terms of gender, when you look at the statistics of land and who owns land, it's skewed based on race, gender, and disability. So you'll see that white people, particularly white male, they still own individually, they still own a large amount of land. And then you'll also see that the trusts and the community-based organizations that own the land, they own that land on behalf of the same individuals who are owning that land individually. So race matters the most, and then you will also see that women are also not having access to land. Black men to a larger extent do, but black women and people with disability, particularly black women with disabilities, they are nowhere featuring, whether you're looking at poverty, whether you're looking at access to education. We are nowhere closer to meeting the 2% that was set. For us as a country to have 2% of people with disabilities in the labor market, we are nowhere closer to that.
And as you say, some of the laws are there, but they're just not being implemented.
They're not being implemented.
Just in terms of government's responsibility, the report also talks about the redistributive fiscal policy choices, which are not necessarily good. How has the impact of the increase of VAT to 15%, have you factored that in?
Yes, we have, and we have made recommendations in line with that, and we have found that it is not constitutionally justifiable because the Constitution itself guarantees equality. And that, even though not said expressly, but it extends to economic inequality. So when you're increasing that VAT to 15%, the most people who suffer are the poor themselves. The rich, it doesn't matter much to them, and they're still better off. So what in essence it does is that you are asking the poor to fund themselves and get themselves out of the poor state that they are in by increasing the VAT, and it just continues the cycle over and over again. So out of the many other options of tax that could have been increased based on the recommendations by the Davis Tax Committee, we chose to go with this one, which doesn't help us in any ways in terms of bridging the inequality gap.
We're speaking to Siphelo Mbeki, who's from the Human Rights Commission. And on the line right now, we have Siphelo from Socio-Economic. Siphelo, a very good morning to you. What is your contribution this morning?
Okay, good morning. How are you?
We're well, thank you.
Yes. Here in South Africa, we encounter a lot of problems that are happening now. The government now, as in, for example, based on our unemployment, it says she brings a private sector, and so that they can also employ young people. And then at the same time, I mean, if you can check, the government is retrenching. Now, National Department of Health has unfairly dismissed 322 graduates. As you see, the state of the National Department of Health is happening currently. Those people are the ones that they were working on hospitals, on the department. Now, the other people of National Department of Health, they are going to those other departments which are that they have to help. I mean, now people, they are not working. I'm also one of those guys, which we are 322 graduates.
Yeah.
And then now this thing is being hiding under the government. Even if we try to fight it, they are not doing anything, but they said they are employing. And then at the same time, what is happening to government, when the person resigns, they don't put another person, they don't advertise the post, or they can advertise the post, but they don't employ the person. They employ person on the critical, maybe something that is critical. So government is no longer doing anything for black people, but now they are saying that they are employing the ministers of what. I mean, there are things that are happening in government. People now, you can see they're looking for a land. We don't have a place to.
Thank you very much for those points. And he raises several points, and I'm going to pick up on a few. One is unemployment. I'd like you to tell me how the report speaks to this societal phenomena. It keeps rising in South Africa. He also speaks about the private sector, and the report speaks about the private sector not sufficiently contributing to transformation, or the transformation of the labor market, or transformation of the economy broadly. What are your thoughts about this?
Starting with the latter point of the private sector not being part of what is happening in terms of bringing about transformation, it is a worrying factor, and the report notes that they have not been doing anything. And the difficulty that the Commission has in holding the private sector to account is that a particular section of the Promotion of Equality, Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, the Equality Act in short, the section that is meant to apply in the private sector and force it to be part of the transformation that we are moving towards is not operational. And the Commission has been saying for the past number of years to the government, the DOJ, and to even to the presidency, that we need to operationalize that particular section so that we as the Commission may be able to force the private sector to be part of the transformation plan. But in terms of unemployment, one of the things that leads to unemployment is the lack of education, basic and higher education. So what the report does in that aspect is that we are looking at higher education and how free education that is being provided now should be directed at the most poor, those who are not those who are socially unequal to others, so that we can have a greater number of people accessing higher education.
Yeah. I know variability must be considered here, but do you foresee that the free education will have an impact on the next report that's going to come out?
Yes, we will be looking at basic education, even going further ahead, and we're going to make sure that it is implemented in a way that gives effect to the equality that we're looking towards. So we will be focusing on it going forward to monitor and make sure that access is provided, particularly to the poor.
You suggest a rights-based perspective in terms of dealing with the inequalities. Which rights in the Constitution can guarantee the citizens of South Africa a move towards equality?
It's particularly the right to equality, ironically, because when you don't have access to houses, the right to equality is affected. When you don't have access to sufficient food as required by the Constitution, your right to equality is affected. So you're saying that's why we've picked on this right itself. When you apply it in education, when you apply it in the labor market, once that is properly implemented in a way that recognizes that the poor need to be prioritized, then we are likely to move towards where we want to move. Because the major problem, one of them at least, is that the access that is there to opportunities now in terms of affirmative action and other measures is not taking into account that we should be focusing on those who have not been having opportunity. So the same people, the same companies continue to benefit over and over without us shifting the focus to those who are more poor, so that we can then make sure that their rights to housing, to work, and to every other thing are guaranteed as required by the Constitution.
So please just unpack this point where the report says poverty has increased, but income inequality has narrowed a little bit. What do you mean there?
So there's a difference between income inequality and wealth inequality. So even though there might be a decrease in income inequality,
so more people are earning a salary.
More people are earning salary, but the issue is how much that salary is. Is it enough for you to be able to uplift yourself and take yourself out of that poverty level that you said is like 992 per month? So even though some people are having access to some jobs, but the jobs are not sustainable enough to make sure that people get themselves out of that particular.
We have another caller on the line. Let's hear what Tsidi from Soweto. Tsidi, where in Soweto are you calling from?
Hello?
Hi Tsidi, where in Soweto are you calling from?
I'm calling from Mokolo.
What's your contribution today?
My contribution is that why can't the government, especially on the side of pensioners, give them at least basic foodstuffs, not to buy again, not to go and buy again, because the money that they are getting as pensioners is very, very little. So they have to go again and buy the very basic foodstuffs. So what I would like to suggest to the government is the government maybe look at giving the pensioners basic foodstuffs like meal, sugar, the basic foodstuffs, rather than again taking from what they get, the little money that they are getting, and go and buy the very foodstuffs.
Tsidi, am I hearing you correctly? Are you saying that foodstuffs must replace grants?
No, they mustn't replace grants.
So over and above?
Over and above, they must get those basic foodstuffs. At least it will boost them, because the money, the SASA money that they are getting is very little.
Could this be a solution,
to go again and spend that money on the foodstuff? As a month end, you find that you're getting nothing.
Yeah. Could that be a solution?
If implementable, it would be a solution, but then it would need more of the money from government itself, for government to be able to provide the groceries and still providing the grants that it is providing. But another option besides that one is that there should be no VAT increase on these particular small items that that most people are living on. So if the government were to go that direction, it would make it easier and alleviate the burden.
But I'm also thinking a solution such as that one takes away the individual's right to choose what they want to spend their money on.
The option of choosing some items that are not. It does not. So we're saying if there's common knowledge of which items are necessary and which items are most people are depending on for a livelihood, basics such as meal, basics such as bread. So once we are in agreement that those items are necessary for people to live on, and it is proven that they do live on those products, then it's the same products that they were living on. It just lowers the price so that they have more access to those particular products.
The other part I want to ask you about is addressing the extreme concentration of income and wealth in the top, how do you say that, deciles of society, but we'll come back to that. We have Daniel on the line from Carltonville. Good morning, Daniel. What would you like to contribute to this conversation?
I wanted to ask a question. Are we lazy? Not everything from us people is about government. We are getting everything from government, the housing from government, school from government, money for our children from government, food at school from our government. Are we that much lazy that we cannot stand up ourselves? I've got 14 years not working, but I'm not poor. I've got food, my children go to school, they've got everything. Are we blaming government for everything? That is my question. Are we saying government must do everything for us?
Yeah,
Thank you
Daniel,
very much.
we get your point, but obviously there's a consideration for different levels of society, and we're not able to get into that conversation about the different classifications of the population in terms of your report. Let's finalize with that one.
No, we even though we do say that those who are able, as Daniel has for himself, to get a startup into whatever business they can do, then that's a good thing, and the government should help them. And that's what we're saying in this, in relation to land, that when people do get access to land, then the government is needed to boost those people in terms of skills, in terms of equipment, so that those people can be self-sustainable.
Where can people find this report?
The report is available online, but there's also
hard copy.
Hard copies that are also available, but mostly it's available online. But there's also snippets that are written up by the Commission that people can read on about the report.
So they can interact with your website, www.
South African Human Rights Commission .org.za.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to us. Siphelo Mbeki is one of the authors of the Inequality Report 2017-2018. Let's take a look at sport now. Valen?